So one of the advantages of being together is we get to be together with some technology that may not always be proven in our individual Zoom lives. Thanks for your patience as we kind of pivot that direction. We are super excited to be here today. And Dale, who owns and leads as an integrator, Centra Homes, one of the largest privately held home builders in Minnesota, has several communities in the northern suburbs. And we're at one of those Centra Homes today. So I'm really grateful for some space that's not just my Zoom room. We're going to talk a lot today about core values, and as you saw in the title, the topic is activating core values and making them powerful enough to realize a generous ROI. And we'll just spend a very brief portion saying, what are core values? Well, we at EOS and other places around the world know core values as timeless, simple, guiding principles that don't change as your business change, but give you the chance to really root to what's most important and to guide without always having to know specific situations. So they guide when there is no guide. They are timeless, meaning that they don't change and that they help us in a variety of different impactful ways. Today, we're really going to talk about how those core values can become activated in real ways that are not just a stated placard of what we hope for or aspire to, but what we really believe has to be true for our business to thrive. There's an article that we're going to send out as a follow-up today, written in Forbes last year by a writer who said the following about core values. He said, core values are not a corporate declaration, but rather a community standard. He went on to say, in any community, values are extracted, lived, and felt, not scripted. And that's really, how do you do that? So we have a variety of ways we do that when we do EOS implementation, and I'll leave that for everybody to manage on their own as you implement EOS. But the reason that Dale's here today as an integrator, one of my clients and one of my dear friends, is because he's doing it in innovative ways that really make a difference. And time allowing, we're going to talk about 3 ways that he's seen that happen. How core values really guide you in work you do with your people, in work you do with partnerships, and in other larger strategic decisions. So let's start right there with people. Dale, you really buy this core values concept, and you do a lot with it. Will you start with the first minute you interview somebody in the hiring process and just explain how you make core values kind of work?
We believe that core values is really where it all begins. And so we utilize the core values right at the beginning when we do an interview with any potential candidate. I do all of the first interviews. Most people are very surprised by that as the president and CEO of a company. However, that's how important we think core values are. And that first interview is all about core values. We do the GWC a little bit in the first, but primarily do they get it and do they have the capacity to do it? It comes in a follow-up interview. Do they understand the job? They have the skill set. But if they don't have the core values, I can't teach those. We can teach various skills. So we really focus on that in the first interview. And we do that trying to get stories. We ask for stories and examples rather than asking directly. Some of our core values example is we have growth is one of our core values, as well as do the right thing. If I ask the average candidate, do you do the right thing? Certainly they're going to give me the answer of yes, I always do the right thing. However, how do I get to the core of it? Do they really do the right thing? And do they do it based on what our definition of the right thing is? Growth is really a usually pretty easy one that we can lead that question through stories. I can ask, tell me about books that you've read recently or seminars you've gone to. For growth, for us specifically means, are you growing and developing your skills? Are you constantly developing as a human being? And so we can do that through stories. And we find just great value in that process and figuring out, do they fit?
Yeah, love that. So as most of you know who think through EOS core values, it really is this collection of stories, legends, anecdotes. I'm interested because growth, someone might hear growth and think the core value is your company growth, but you're saying, no, it's a chance in your initial interview to say growth really is individual growth and development of skill. And then you ask questions after the outcomes that you think would naturally come if the value was in place.
Which really is a great point, because the core values really need to have a definition. Because if I say growth, many people might think it's growth of the company, where it's really as you're growing as an individual, are you developing your skills?
So you do every single interview of every position that comes into the company?
Every position, regardless what they do. Now, we don't have 1,000 employees, so maybe that's what makes it possible. But we've hired in the last 6 months, probably 12 people, and I have done the interview process for all 12 of those, which, as we all know, if you hire, you certainly are interviewing a lot more than 12 people to get those 12.
Yeah. And so the core values becomes the first filter, and then they may or may not make it out of that to move to the next.
That is correct.
Say, are you really good at engineering or electrical work, etc. You posted, as you said this, I'm thinking about, you posted on LinkedIn an interesting story about doing this. And I think it was with the core value of humility, which is hard to assess in an interview. Will you just share that story as we talk about this with this community?
That was some time ago. I do remember that. As you stated, humility can be a really tough one to identify through stories to figure out, is this person really humble? And so I was having a hard time extracting that from this individual, very qualified candidate. He checked all the boxes, and I was trying to figure out, is he really humble? And so I just finally just directly asked the question, can you define the word humble? And he asked me, he says, you mean like what the dictionary, how they would define it? I said, no, I'd like to know how you would define it. What does it mean to you to be humble? He gave a really long pause, and he said, well, humble means that maybe you know everything, but you're not cocky or arrogant about it. And that made me pause for a little bit. I thought, well, so I asked a follow-up question. I said, well, do you think that maybe humble might imply that you don't know it all? And his follow-up answer was, well, but what if you do know it all?
So not humble. He didn't pass that screen.
Yeah, the interview was mostly over.
Yeah, got it. Wow. You know, what I'm struck by in some ways is the fact that these stories are examples of core values. That's really where core values come alive, and they're not just on your badge or on the wall. They're examples that are alive, that are in 2020, 2021, they're recent. And then we tell those in what we call the core values speech to really help people understand, hey, this is what core values really means, and it's alive and well or not, and this is how we act on that. So fantastic. So when you hire people, you also then don't give up. You lead with core values when you onboard. And I'm amazed at your commitment to that. Will you just talk about your onboarding using core values?
Yeah, that's a similar example. I do the onboarding. The first 4 hours of every employee we hire, they spend the first 4 hours with me. Again, emphasizing the importance of these principles. And in that first hour or so, we spend a little bit of time getting to know the new hire, asking those questions you can't ask through the hiring process if you want to stay out of legal trouble. And so we get to know them a little bit better. And then I start telling stories about myself. And all of those stories happen to be those same stories that you would use if you did your speech when you introduced core values to your company. I don't do it as a speech form, but I tell stories, and I tell a series of stories that all support these core values that all happen to be about me and my life and life experiences. And so I share those stories. And once I'm done with those stories, the individual really feels like they have a connection, that they know me a little bit better. They feel a little more welcome as a result of that. And then from there, we use 90IO, and I open 90 right then. I go to the VTO section of 90. And right there, it starts with the core values. We then go through those core values, and I talk about, I correlate the stories that I just told to each one of those core values. And then we go through the actual definitions of what does growth mean to Central Homes as us as a company. And then in all of those cases, we also have a quote that support it, that further back that up. And then from there, we go through the rest of the VTO of what the 10-year, the 1 year, the rocks, and how all of that works. But it all starts, that foundation starts with those core values.
And so are you also saying you do the onboarding of every employee once they've been filtered for values and GWC?
I do it with every one of them, which can be challenging. I travel quite a bit for various commitments that I have. And there's been a couple recently that I actually had to do it over Zoom, which is not ideal. I prefer to do them in person, but we did them over Zoom and it worked really well. But we went through that process because that's just how important this is. And part of the process that we go through is we tell them the hiring process we went through. And sometimes you see these aha moments because they're like, oh, that makes sense. You never did ask me a single question whether I knew the skill set, or you know, it was weird that the president of the company is actually interviewing me. But it really then emphasizes. And then we also talk about the going forward and how we do GWC and the core values every quarter. And we use that for coaching, for retention, and the entire process.
Wow, awesome. Love it. I love that the onboarding moves right to the VTO, and that you sounds like you're using the VTO. That could be a whole nother event that we talk about how you onboard using the VTO, but you start there. And I'll tell you what, I've been super impressed by my experience as an implementer with many companies who are doing this way, that really, truly, the core values are at the foundational bedrock first level of the VTO. I got a quick question that I had not thought of till now. I have 30% of the clients that I work with who are EOS implementing in their companies say to me when we get into the session on core values, I've read the articles you sent on values and I think it's fluffy and I don't know if it's worth our time. And you're clearly spending a lot of time on it. What would you say to skeptics who say values is a statement that we might believe in, but not necessarily drive our business by? Would you say anything to remove that skepticism?
Yeah, we've used a lot of different programs and we do a lot of training and try to improve ourselves constantly. And through another course that was out there, we had a core value. It was excellent experiences.
That was the core value.
That was the core value. We create excellent experiences at all levels. What was interesting though is we found one day, I was seeing that there were some challenges with that. But one day there was this aha moment of we all have different ideas and definitions of what excellent experiences are. And we really had failed using that because what an excellent experience is to you could be entirely different for me. And we hadn't defined it, and it was a single core value. How can you sum up who we are as a company in a single core value of excellent experiences? And we also found that that was somewhat aspirational. It's really important that your core values are non-negotiables, not aspirational. And so if as a company, we aspire to constantly be learning as individuals and growing, but we're not very good at it, well, that's an aspiration. And that's something certainly we should work on and we should focus on and grow and develop, but it shouldn't be a core value because core values are non-negotiable. If you want to work in a particular company, they should be non-negotiable. And we have found it has been amazing as we've used that because it makes the process of onboarding and hiring people and those decisions so much easier. And then also enables our people to be able to make decisions independent of the leadership because they know who we are. They represent those principles and they can make decisions all by themselves.
Yeah, that's great. As our time is ticking, I want to ask one more thing that I think is unique to what you do. You have decided that you don't just use core values with your people, but this idea of your partners. You use a people analyzer approach, right person, right seat, core values, GWC, with your trade partners and others. That's innovative, right? And though we might say that's best practice, how do you make that real?
That's a really tough one. Everybody on this call is probably aware the home building market right now is really on fire. The demand is very high and we're having a hard time keeping up and there's a lot of moving parts. And so right now we just hope that people will show up on the job and actually build the homes. That's our biggest hope. However, we really use the core values with everybody. We employ well over 100 different companies and entities. And so we use those core values, whether it's with legal counsel or it's an electrician or an engineer, we use those core values similar as we're onboarding and identify, is this going to be a good partner? Because they're an extension of us. They represent us as a company. And so we want to make sure that they fit that. Now, it's a lot harder to do than to say when we have such labor constraints right now. However, we use it for coaching. Somebody comes in and we're having a problem. We teach them our core values. And our core values aren't outlandish. People agree with them. They're usually, yeah, those are good principles we should all be living by. And so we can coach on those and help people develop and improve. And ideally, we terminate relationships based on those core values, which right now is a little bit tougher.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're at the end of our time, but I'll just say it's been such a really awesome opportunity for me to see how Centra Homes uses core values and makes them real. And when they're activated, they deliver a really powerful return on the investment of time and effort for core values. And they are the foundation of what we build in our vision and how we lead toward execution. So in follow-up to this call, Dale and I have assembled a one-pager of ideas and questions that you might ask yourself as you think about making core values real and activated in your business. And that article that I mentioned earlier, that's a great one from Forbes. So we'll send that as a follow-up as well as our contact information. We're here to help if we ever can. Thanks for giving us the opportunity. Jennifer, we're going to turn it back to you.